This episode is brought to you by the good folks at Earth Medicine. Earth Medicine is an This episode is brought to you by the good folks at Earth Medicine. Earth Medicine is a granular organic fertilizer that you can add to houseplants, flowers, and gardens. It's OMRI certified and made from biology that is 100% shelf stable, doesn't expire, and takes about 2 years to manufacture from start to finish. Most fertilizers are synthetic based, which means they're harmful to the environment and sometimes toxic and deadly. Earth Medicine is 100% natural, made from the best anaerobic compost, and it amends to the soil and feeds the plant. Earth Medicine is a Canadian company run by two sisters. They get all their material from their dad's farm in Idaho, and starting next week, they'll have an amazing sale that you don't want to miss. If you're a big plant guy like me, head on over to www.earthmedicineeco.com or visit them on Instagram to join the movement at earthmedicine.fertilizer. All right, let's get into it. Okay, everybody, welcome back to episode number 4 of the daddyDANK podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Frank Davalos, and here we are again, episode 4. Pretty crazy. I just want to start off the episode by saying thank you to everybody who came on and listened to episode number 3. It was a very cool experience to get to do it with Hope and to get to share sort of her perspective on the whole thing because all of you guys are so used to hearing my fucking annoying voice and hearing me talk about her and talking about the baby, but it was nice that I know a lot of you guys messaged me and said that it was super cool getting her perspective. And also we got some really amazing messages of people who either could relate to just going through a difficult experience or going through an unconventional experience or whatever. So it was very cool. It was the first time that I've done a podcast on daddyDANK where I've actually felt like maybe we made a difference in somebody's day. So that was very cool. So thank you all for listening. You're probably wondering what that music was at the beginning. And it was actually an old rap song that I made when I was like, I don't know, I'm trying to think back, but over a decade ago for sure. I must have been like 19 or something. And I was perusing my email last night, and I just came across that song, and I thought it was funny. I've been kind of like putzing around and working on some intro music for the pod, but I have to relearn all the like music applications and shit. So I spend most of my time like learning how to map notes to my MIDI keyboard and shit like that. So I haven't actually got the music made, but I thought it might be funny to play that song. I'll finish it off at the very end, and I'll play the whole song through. It's fucking ridiculous. I don't know what I thought I was doing there, but it's still kind of fun, and I thought it was funny to like look back at my white rapper career the same way that, you know, Marky Mark might, or Will Smith or Vanilla Ice or something like that. So anyways, I digress. This week I wanted to talk about something that happened 2 days ago. I originally was hoping that this episode was going to be a conversation with my friend Andy about just a variety of different topics. And what ended up happening instead was we had an amazing 90-minute conversation. And I recorded 2 tracks of my own voice, and I did not arm his track for his voice. So that was a very beautiful realization when we just went through, you know, a really amazing hour and a half conversation where I legitimately learned a lot about all the different things that we talked about. And and then I fucked it, I fucked it hard. I've been having some, I guess, audio technical difficulties. So I've like always been sort of a pretty good with technology. Like literally since I was 14, I've always been interested in it. I started out doing like audio production, and that's sort of how I got familiar with like being able to record. Started off with instruments. I was in bands and shit, and now obviously it's helped me for my podcast. But even though I've always been sort of good at that kind of stuff, I'm also like not smart at that kind of stuff. I spend a lot of time troubleshooting. I spend a fuckload of time like putzing around figuring out what I'm doing wrong. And with audio, I don't know if anyone that listens has ever tried audio production, but I feel like out of all the creative things that I do, it's the one thing that I have to troubleshoot the most out of anything that I do. And one of the problems I was having was we would be recording a conversation and then all of a sudden it would just stop recording, which didn't make any sense to me because I have a sick computer, I have good gear, like I have everything that I need, and I've recorded audio with a lot less in my life, and a way shittier computer, way slower, way smaller. So like it wasn't making sense to me. So I was unplugging my USB-C dock. I was all this technical shit that none of you guys give a fuck about. But I was doing everything, and I thought I had it figured out for the Ford podcast. I had tried out a new software for the first time, and one of the things that you have to do when you record a track is you have to arm each track with each specific input for the person that's talking. And Ford came in, and he's an electrician by trade, and so he was going to change some of our outlets in our room to be USB outlets. And so he did that, but what he needed to do was he told us to unplug everything that like is important that doesn't want to get fried in case something goes wrong when he fixes the outlets. And so I unplugged the podcast setup that I had previously set up. And then when we got back into the studio after he had helped us out, I essentially had to like quickly reconfigure the audio podcast setup, and I got everything good, but instead of changing the input to input 2, which is his input, I left it on input 1 because I was just kind of like in a hurry to get started and whatever. And that's just one of the hard lessons that you learn when you do this kind of thing. And I thought at the time I was like heartbroken because we had such a great, amazing conversation, like we always do. We've been having amazing conversations since 2 decades ago. But this one was cool because we sort of put down our phones and we had sort of an idea of what I had an idea of what I wanted to like learn from him about, because he's very good at explaining things. He's always been a great teacher, and he has a lot of interests that I have a lot of interest in. So I thought he could give me some perspective on things. And one of the big things we talked about was like electricity. And I know it's fucking hilarious, but we talked about like how electricity works and like this thing that we all take for granted. How does it work? And I just found it kind of ironic that I fucked it on the pod because I had to unplug all the audio gear. Anyways, so it got me thinking, and like I've thought about, we tried to redo it, but then it just didn't seem authentic. And I really it got to a point where I didn't know if we'll ever be able to redo it. And so one of the things that I really wanted to, I guess, get at in this episode is just like the theme about failure. Like it's something that I think all of us have experienced in some facet or another. I know I have failed in so much shit in my life. And it was just funny because I felt like, we had this amazing time. We had this really good conversation, and I wanted to record it for me because I wanted to look back on it and just have this cool conversation with my buddy. But I failed. I fucked it. I ruined it. And then I had to admit to all the listeners and all the people on my Instagram that I failed hard. And I thought about like pretending like I didn't, but that like isn't the reason I'm doing this. Like the whole idea of this podcast is to just watch me fuck up and be able to either learn from it or look back and laugh on it or whatever. And I don't know, I guess take you guys along with me. It's been so fun so far. This literally is one of my favorite things to do. I don't know why, but it just is. It gives me something that I don't get in my day-to-day. But the idea of failure just seemed so fitting for today's episode, because this episode wasn't supposed to be me just sitting here talking. It was supposed to be me learning from my buddy. And I've kind of like, man, I've failed at so much shit throughout my life. I can think of just a handful of things, like when I moved to Vancouver in 2010 to play college lacrosse. I had always grown up being like good at lacrosse in Saskatchewan. I would get tournament all-star awards, and like I was considered a good player here. And then when I got to Vancouver on the team, it was like these dudes have been playing since they were 4 years old. They were all very like, their lacrosse IQ was on a whole other level than mine. I was playing field lacrosse, so I'd grown up playing box lacrosse, and so I just had so much to learn, and I felt so out of my element. And I played 3 out of 4 years. I took a year off because I just wanted to like snowboard, and I don't know, I was bad at taking authority, so there was a kind of like a drill sergeant coach on that team, and we just kind of butted heads, and I was just, a little fuck. And but the reason I say that I kind of failed at that lacrosse endeavor when I moved to Vancouver was because it was one of those things where I allowed myself to get in my own way. And I took all that energy that I could have used towards working harder or getting better or being more positive and being a better team player. I took all of that energy and I like put it into being angry at the coaches, or being kind of like being very insecure with my own abilities, even though I knew I was good enough to be on that team. I still like told myself every day that I wasn't. And I always, that's kind of one of the pivotal moments in my life that I think about when I think about failure, because I could have done it. Had I known then what I know now, I feel like I could have done that whole 4 years a lot differently and probably a lot better. I probably could have done better in lacrosse. I probably could have been a better team player. I probably would have been more coachable, less of a cancer, less negative, all of these things, right? I was young. I was completely out of my element. I was completely alone in Vancouver. So there are a bunch of excuses I can make for it, but I failed. And the way I look at it, I failed. And like other situations in my life, I'm sure everyone has these, but like I remember when I moved to Chile, I left a job for money. I was happy at this job doing marketing for this company, and then I got into, I guess, sales for this company called Arc Daily, which is the biggest architecture website of all time. It is the most visited in the world, and their main head office was in Chile. It was just like a mansion where a bunch of people in their laptops just all worked in the mansion with their feet dangling in the pool. It was very cool. All the people were deadly, but I fucking sucked at sales. Like I don't have the gene. If you've ever worked in sales, you know that you need a gene for sure to be one of those guys that are just like fake friends and kiss ass to make a sale. And I just didn't have it in me. And so I ended up getting fired from that job. I had never in my life been fired from anything. Like I've always been a good worker. I have good work ethic. But when I got to that job, I spent 11 months or something working there. And I liked it. Like I loved the people, but I hated the work. I felt like I was selling ads that didn't work to startup architecture companies that didn't have the money. And so it just felt weird to me. And I ended up applying for an audiovisual job in the organization, and then they just kind of sat me down and they were like, "What are you doing? Why are you, why are you applying to be a photographer? If you're supposed to be running the remote sales team or whatever." And it just kind of all fell apart. And I failed at that. I got fired. I fucked it. And I remember it being sort of a shock to me that, I felt like I had worked so hard those 11 months and I did enough. But I think on my bike ride home after doing the walk of shame out of the mansion, when everyone's just like looking at you, being like, "Okay, bye," like waving at you in the window, I felt like a big weight off my chest when I was riding my bike home. I'm like, fuck, now I don't have to be at the beach and be like wondering, like, how am I going to close these sales or whatever. And it's just like, I guess like the theme that I've sort of come to discover throughout all my own personal failures is that, like, I know it's cliche as shit and I know you already know what I'm going to say, but you kind of learn from your failures. And it's like, it really is like the way in which you are able to sort of take a bird's eye view at your own self and your own abilities and skills and failures, and sort of assess yourself from afar instead of being so caught up in it. I think that like failure is one of those things that feels so bad. Like every time it happens, no matter how prepared you are for the possibility of failure, it still never feels good. It's one of the worst feelings of all time, whether you fail in something personal that you're doing or a relationship or any type of situation where you did not succeed. Just feels bad. And I think a lot of people deal with it differently. Some people seek, I guess, solace in others, whether it's your family or friends that support you or whatever. For me, I kind of have to have this like shutdown period. So like when I came to the realization that Ford's episode was fucked because of me, I had this shutdown day where I literally was depressed for the entire night, the rest of the night, and also the following day, where I had to sort of just think about it for 24 hours straight and sort of draw some type of silver lining from it. I tend to kind of turn away from people when it comes to like my own failures, and I need to sort of deal with it on my own. And I think I've always kind of been that way. I always kind of say that I'm an introverted extrovert. So like I have this extroverted side where I, am loud, obnoxious, I'm social. I can handle myself in those types of situations, but at the end of the day, where I really want to be is alone in a room by myself doing something. Yeah, like when the whole thing happened with Ford's episode, I was so bummed. Ugh, sorry, that's gross. I didn't mean to do that. I had a beer. All right. But it really was I felt some level of depression after it. But you know what happened from it is I ended up figuring out the problem. And here I am 19 minutes into the episode, and I have the problem sorted out. There's no more stoppages of recording. I know better now, and I'm working with the software that I know how to work with. And I solved the problem through that, and I learned a bunch of things along the way, and I would have never done that had I not fucked it. Fucked the episode with Ford. So, and that's kind of like the thing. Like, what do you get from failure? Like for me, I feel like from that experience, let's just like, we're breaking it down. This is a very simple, like a lot of you guys are probably like, this is a very stupid example. Like it's a fucking podcast episode that nobody listens to. But for me, it's not. It's like it meant a lot that I lost it and then I fucked it and it was my fault and I had nobody to blame but myself. And one thing that I got from that mistake was a renewed perspective sort of on the value of things that happen in my life. So like that conversation, whether or not I was able to capture it, it still gave me something. It provided me personally with a great deal of value. I remember I've been like literally all the things that we talked about during that podcast, I have been thinking about ever since. And I definitely think that I just captured that conversation and had everything went perfectly hunky-dory, whatever, I don't know that I would have thought about that conversation in the same way. Maybe I would have, but I kind of would have looked at it as like a good episode versus a meaningful conversation. That's not true either, fuck. Because it was a meaningful conversation either way. My point is I really kind of, it was kind of like a Buddha moment for me where I realized it came, it went, and I got something from it, and I took something away from it. And I was okay with that. I had to be okay with that, obviously. And I think that you also get like kind of a stiff upper lip from failure. Like it's one of those things that hardens you a bit so that it prepares you for the next time it happens, because I think it happens throughout all of our lives all the time. And we all experience different failures at different times in our life, sometimes all at once, sometimes scattered throughout our years or whatever. But I think each time you kind of come to the realization that it isn't the end of the world. You survive the failure, and you, generally speaking, learn quite a bit about yourself from it, about the world around you, and it kind of gives you the courage to fucking get up and do it again. I feel like that's how stand-up comics must, like what they must get from bombing, you know, where it's like, holy fuck, that moment sucked. It was the worst 2 minutes of my comedic life, but I survived it. I learned probably a lot about why that bit failed or what I could have done better. And then you go out there, you do it again, you get better, and you become fucking Bill Burr. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a comic in the world that hasn't bombed. And I think that you can just kind of look at that and apply it to your life, you know? And I've kind of always been one of those guys that has like I put myself out there, you know, like people are pretty aware of the type of person that I am. I don't think anyone's surprised when I say ridiculous shit. And like I know part of it is I thrive from the attention, probably because I'm 5'5", and the only way that I can ever feel big is to make my voice bigger or whatever, you know, like that's probably the psychology of it on one hand. But I also think that I put myself out there because to me, it like holds me accountable. Like for instance, with this, like I like the idea of failing on the podcast, on the stage of whoever is listening, because like it's like one of those things. Like I write in this blog that I have sometimes, hardly ever now, but I did quite a bit, and before I wrote in it all the time. And like sometimes I just like going back and reading and like thinking about the person that I was at the time that I wrote that, because like some things have changed, other things have stayed the same, but it's definitely a useful exercise to go back and like see how far you've come, I guess. And like, am I embarrassed about failing on the public stage? Yes, of course. I mean, kind of, you know, like I wish I was smarter so I could have figured out what was wrong with my audio gear so that we could have captured that amazing conversation that I personally think a lot of you guys would have got a lot out of, because Ford's just so articulate in the way that he explains things like electricity. But had that not happened, I feel like I would have never spent the past 2 days, probably 8 hours in the past 2 days, like researching audio gear and equipment that might be able to just help me focus more on podcasting rather than the technical production side of it. But I also learned a lot about audio. I learned about sample rates and buffer sizes and all these different things that I knew the words, but I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know the actual ways in which it worked together, and I would have never learned that had it not been from that terrible experience of just fucking the dog ski. So, yeah, I figured I would just make this episode as a way to kind of celebrate my epic failure. And I didn't want to miss a week. I personally way rather do this with other people, like friends or interesting people that can help me learn about things that I'm just curious to learn about. But sometimes I just think that doing it on my own and reflecting or whatever is good. And I didn't want to miss a week. I want to keep putting out these episodes. I don't care. Like, I don't care about anything other than doing it every week. So I wanted one for this week. And I thought failure's fucking perfect. Go out there, make mistakes. And here I am, keeping myself accountable, trying to laugh it off. But like, it's episode 4 and there's already hundreds of people listening. Like, the last episode got hundreds of downloads, which to me is kind of crazy. Like, I couldn't imagine talking in front of a room of 200 people every week. So it's kind of cool. It's nerve-wracking. It's I think it reassures me that like I can have failures and mistakes and do fucking dumb shit sometimes and have less good weeks or episodes, and then come back and do it better the next time or do it worse and just keep going and learning from all of it. So like, it's funny, this is episode 4. I can't wait to look back in 100 episodes and just like laugh at all this fucking shit. But honestly, here I'm definitely want to have Ford back because he had touched on so many interesting things that I think we all ask ourselves sometimes, like how light works. Like, none of us, we just take that shit for granted, like, but imagine a world without electricity. It wouldn't make any sense. So I'm definitely going to try and redo the episode next week after I forgot everything that he told me so that we can have an actual organic, authentic conversation about it. But I've also reached out to a bunch of different people around the city and around the province. I'll hopefully be talking with a teacher about the struggles of, teaching and what the expectations that parents have, or the system in general, and how probably not conducive to teachers it is. And I reached out to a really deadly photographer because I wanted to learn more about processing film. I developed my own film, but I kind of wanted to learn from like somebody who does it a lot more than me and just ask questions and learn about the process. I think it would be a cool thing to do, is just like learn about how a photograph was made, And I have so many ideas. Like, I write them down every single day of just like cool things that I think would be a fun idea to explore. And I'm so glad that I have this outlet to see these ideas through, because otherwise I just get so tightly wound up and I just can't be the type of person that I need to be. So that's it for this week. I know it's a short one. I prefer, like, these ones where I do it myself, I prefer to keep them nice, short, sweet. And just I will be back next week with something. I don't know what, but we're in this shit together. And be sure to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. We get so many, like, for that last episode 3, I got so many deadly messages, and I really do truly read them all and thank all of you guys for, I guess, engaging with what we had to talk about in the last episode, and kind of relating your own experience and sharing your experiences with us. That is like a really cool byproduct of this podcast. So if you want to keep listening every week, you might as well subscribe. so that they can just pop into your download inbox or whatever, and you can listen to the episode each week. And if you want to leave a rating and a review, that's always helpful. It helps others discover my podcast, and all of that good stuff. So I'm very glad to be a part of this. I'm glad to have you along with me. Make sure you follow me at Dank Around the World on Instagram. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next week. Alrighty. And here's the hit rap song of 2009.
Here we go, I got habits, traffic's a static. So I open up the glove where I stash the buster, roll it, twist it, take a fat hit, and grab a cigarette with a pack on the dash. Kid later, waiting at the red light on the corner. It's boring, 4 in the morning. Cheer, I got some habits that stick. Blowing smoke from the minute I awaken till I get sick. Spitting on the microphone until it gets thick. Cause when I want something shit, I gotta get it. I got a visions of this hip hop string, and I gotta thread it with the thimble like a guitar pick. Don't need no CZ toes with the bacon strip. Oh, the pros with the AK clip shit. I kill you with my music script. No need for an ego trip. No, an advocate to back me with. Watch me whip the music industry to satisfactory. Equipped by my mind to the factory. Fact is, please, we all got habits. Matter of fact, kid, I pull out my hatchets. Here's a chorus egg and wait for me to hatch it. Pause this shit so I can take a hit. I got habits of many different kinds. Until these days when you got no peace of mind. I got habits on the television, radio shit. What the media DJs know. I got habits, acoustics, open for the loop shit. Hyping my music, ain't trying to prove shit. I just want a little credit for managing the habits that I inhabit. Got tasties, the food is tasty. Hot box, getting a little hazy. Crack a window maybe, nah, fuck it. Only can live once, can't touch this untouchable but fuckable. Fuck the cuddle and cut to the bed spins. Cut the tension and let's begin. The original sin on a whim. I am falling in love in all the wrong places. Face it, don't fake it. Everyone's faithless. Get off, get out no long-term relation. Sexual frustration, masturbating station set up for recreation. No patience, 2 clicks of a mouse then sensation. Payments on a credit card, shoes, clothes, screens, technology. Oh Mary Jane, you are the best of me. Faking in the tenant beds, and we're taking hallucinogenic meds, and we are waiting to hear what an anchor said. We're sorry to inform you, but the troops are dead. So cue the loop instead and shoot some hoops instead. So let's get baked and make no mistakes in our beds, but instead let's bake this whole wheat bread and put it in the hands of the unfed. Confederation, fertilization of the First Nations grasses. To get to the top, you gotta look down on the masses. So tread the rotten gingy that fills up your glasses. Cause in this hell on earth, there are no free passes. Now that's just sad, but so true. We all got mad habits and we ain't got nothing to prove. Now that's just sad, but so true. We all got mad habits and we ain't got nothing to prove. Now that's just sad, but so true. We all got mad habits and we ain't got nothing to prove. Now that's just sad, but it's so true. We all got mad habits, now watch as we break on through. It's because we got habits, so many of them. It's hard to backtrack where we started any of them. Habits, this is some of what we done to have a little fun. It's because we got habits. There are no consequences when we've lost our senses. Habits, we all got the shit, and we're never gonna stop the shit. Yeah, we all got habits. 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 Addicts of satisfaction. Action reaction. Habits. Addicts of satisfaction. Action reaction. Habits. Addicts of satisfaction.